Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about how to create some recession and separation within an image. And what I wanted to do in this particular image, which was taken in Hokkaido a couple of years ago, was to effectively push back and de-emphasize the silver birch here, and to bring forward and emphasize, by contrast, this dark trunk tree here. Now it's quite obvious why I took this picture, because I was very attracted to the shape and the way these branches are sort of splaying out, like a bit like a sort of spider's web. And of course the contrast between the light silver birch, I think will make a lovely picture. Now we want to push these back, we want to make these less emphatic within the image, and in particular we've got to do some work on these bamboo that are sticking through. Some of these areas are quite dark. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a duplicate layer, Command J, and I'm going to put the whole image back into Camera Raw. So we go up to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and that will load the image into this, and we can see our image here good to go. Let's just reduce that a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Now I want to work on these areas, so I'm going to be using Camera Raw to work on these. So I'm going to go to a targeted adjustment brush, make sure everything is set back to 0. So we click up there, reset local corrections. Let's get our mask and let's just start painting in these areas here. So all the silver birch that I want to sort of de-emphasize within the picture. Okay, so we just do that there. Let's bring our brush down here using the bracket keys to increase and decrease the size of the brush. We're going to go into this area here and just possibly in here as well. Okay, so there we have it. I think we've covered most of the areas that we want. So let's switch off the mask and the overlay. And what I'm going to do here is to increase highlights. Okay. And I'm going to increase shadows. Okay. And I'm going to push the blacks forward. The blacks because I want to reduce the darkness of the bamboo in this particular picture. So I'm just going to push those forward. Let's zoom in a bit there so you can see what's going on. Bring forward the blacks. We could even increase exposure ever so slightly. So effectively we're making this high key. So we can look at before and after. There's before and there's after. Okay, so that's quite nice. I might just bring down the highlights there and the shadows ever so slightly. And the last thing we will do on this particular area, let's make sure we're on the active selection, is to use the D Haze tool. Now if you increase D Haze, it adds contrast. You might know that, you might be familiar with that. That's how we dehaze a picture per se. But if we go negatively, it reduces contrast, which is actually a good thing for us. That's what we want there. So I'm going to bring the shadows back a touch because the dehaze is doing most of the work for what we want. I think that's pretty much where I want it. Okay, so the background, all the silver birch are looking quite nice and light. We've got a few dark areas here which we can tackle a little bit later. So let's put this back into Photoshop. And here it is loading. And if we go up to the eyeball on the layer, switch that on and off. So that's quite nice. Now what I want to do is to emphasize this tree here and this tree here. So the challenge would be, how do you do that? How do you select those trees? Well, there's a great way of doing that. And that's through select by color range. A bit of a misnomer because actually we are, excuse me, we are on a black and white image. Now we've got 3 pipettes here, a selection, initial selection, add to selection and subtract from selection. And we've got 2 sliders here. Okay, one is fuzziness and the second one is range. So if we just select in here, what you can see here is we've selected the tree, okay, which is exactly what we want. If we increase fuzziness, that's basically saying to the program, how near to that particular selection or color do you want to select? How broad? Okay, so the more fuzziness we have, the broader the selection. Okay, we want this to be quite tight. And the second selection is how far from where I initially selected do you want me to look? So if we reduce the range, it goes very little, and if we increase the range, it goes very far. Okay. Now, as you see, as we go further, we're starting to select some of the other elements within the picture which we don't want. So first of all, you could tune it by bringing down fuzziness. That's the first thing. And the second thing, by bringing down range. Okay. Now, we haven't got the whole tree there. So what we do is now we click on the plus pipette here, and we carefully select around the trees that we want, and you can see that systematically we're getting everything we want. Now you can see there it went a bit far. I don't want those, so I'll click the minus pipette to reduce or remove from the selection. I don't want these bits here, okay, and I don't want that bit there. So now I'll go back to the plus. So you have to kind of play around a little bit there. Okay, I've got those areas there. Maybe let's just reduce the range just a touch. Maybe the fuzziness. Bring down the fuzziness. I'm not too worried about that. Let's just add to this. Just make sure we've got everything we wanted. I went a bit too far there, so we're going to get rid of those there. Let's go back to the plus, and we'll select those branches there, and maybe these branches here. Okay, and I think that's a pretty good selection of what I want. We click OK, and what that will give us are the marching ants. So this is the selection of what we've selected. If we went into quick mask, you could see what has been selected, and you could improve on that particular selection by using the brush tool. So what I'm going to do here is put on a curve. So here's a curve for that selection of those trees, and essentially I'm going to bring down the darkness of this. So let's just zoom in a bit here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so that's before and after. I don't want all the tones to come down. I want to retain some of the textures in there. So I'm just going to lift ever so slightly the lighter tones, and I can afford to bring down the darker tones ever so slightly. So before and after. Okay, and there we have it. So let's pull that to full screen. Let's bring that down, and we can see that we've now got a nice dark pair of trees here, and we've got the lighter trees over here. Now for these particular problem areas, what I could do is use the healing brush tool. So what I'll need to do is to create a new layer, go to the healing brush tool, make sure that all layers up here are selected, and basically I'm going to use the healing brush tool, and I'm going to reduce the size of that brush, hit option, and basically just go in there and change some of that. Perhaps I'll now use the clone tool, and over here something like that. Okay, and there we have it. So if we click on this with the Alt key, before, after, and essentially that's exactly what I was after. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.